Good evening, and thank you, Caroline. I'm Peter Gelb, the Met's General Manager, and I'm very happy to report that the Metropolitan Opera is now the opera house where the pantheon of composers includes not only Wagner, Strauss, and Verdi, but also Glass, Adams, and Blanchard. We're not suggesting that Puccini roll over, only that the time has come for new works to take a prominent place besides the timeless classics. For Terence Blanchard's Champion, with the libretto by Michael Cristofer, its time has most definitely come. So thank you for joining us tonight. At the start of last season, Terence Blanchard was the first black composer to ever have his work performed at the Met. Fire Shut Up in My Bones. But he certainly won't be the last. I'm proud to say that in the coming seasons, there will be numerous Met premieres as we attempt to revitalize the repertoire, some by other black composers and other composers of color, both female and male, and about subjects and themes that we can all relate to, and all on the highest artistic level and featuring our greatest singing artists too, black, white, gay, even countertenors. It's not that we're woke, we're just waking up. I'm convinced that opera's future success depends on finding a better balance of the immortal classics and the new and relatable. That's why in a few weeks, when Terence Champion has its premiere at the Met on April 10th, it will be playing in repertory alongside Rosenkavalier and Tosca. Those immortal characters of the Marschallin and Floria Tosca will be joined by a new contender, Emile Griffith. There he is. The former middleweight boxing champion of the world, whose tortured true life story was an opera waiting to happen. So let's get down to business, and in this evening's program of talk and music about Champion, to my right is a legendary Grammy Award-winning composer who is music's quadruple threat, acclaimed jazz trumpeter and jazz composer, film score composer, including most of Spike Lee's movies, and extraordinary opera composer. Please welcome Terence Blanchard. I've known you, Terence, for many years, and proudly released 3 recordings of yours when I was at Sony Classical, but I can't take credit for being the impresario who commissioned you to write your first 2 operas. That honor goes to the visionary artistic director and accomplished stage director sitting next to Terence, the artistic director of the Opera Theater of St. Louis, and director of the Met's sensational productions of Porgy and Bess, and co-director of the Met's production of Fire Shut Up My Bones, and director of the Met's production of Champion. Please welcome James Robinson. As I mentioned earlier, Champion is based on the unlikely but true life story of Emile Griffith, who grew up in the U.S. Virgin Islands, came to New York as a teenager to pursue his trade of making ladies' hats, and ended up becoming middleweight champion of the world. He led a closeted gay life, an obvious necessity for a sports icon in the 1960s. And after being outed by his friend and arch rival, Benny Kid Paret, at the weigh-in for their championship bout in 1962, killed Paret in the ring and spent the rest of his life regretting it. The opera is conducted by Met music director Yannick Ne, my fellow champion of new music at the Met, and he would be here tonight if not for the fact that he's pursuing one of his other passions, which is working with the young artists of the Met, who have a special program tonight on the Opera House stage. But he's with us here in spirit and was with them today in rehearsal, along with our cast. So, Champion stars Ryan Speedo Green as the young Emile Griffith, Eric Owens as the older Emile Griffith, and Latonya Moore as Emile's mother, Emelda. And you're going to get to hear them all tonight. Terence, you said that you always are interested in the stories of people who have suffered under the weight of their past. And is that what first attracted you to Griffith as a subject of this opera?
What attracted me to, well, first of all, I'm a big boxing fan. And my best friend, who is here working with us, training some of the singers, was a heavyweight champion. His name is Michael Bent. And when he told me of the story of Emile Griffith, I was really intrigued about it. And the next step was Jim Robinson called me to write an opera, and I was intrigued as to whether he was sane or not to ask me to write an opera. And then I thought about a storyline, and when I saw Emile's book, the thing that made me want to write the opera about him was the line in his book where he says, "I killed the man and the world forgave me, but I love the man and the world wants to kill me." It's a very powerful line, and it just made the whole notion of him not being able to celebrate his success openly with somebody he loved more powerful for me. And so I brought it to Jim, and initially Jim thought he thought I just wanted to do a boxing opera. But once he read the book, he saw how powerful the story was and how it's really about redemption and about him forgiving himself. And I thought, just like in music, in my jazz career, I should say, a lot of that music that we create really helps people to heal their souls. And I thought by doing this story, we could help other people do the same.
Thank you for that. So Jim, maybe you could give your side of the story of how you, what inspired you to commission Terence, and how did it come about from your perspective?
Well, I became artistic director at Opera Theater of St. Louis in 2009, and the company had a tradition of doing the occasional new work in its history, and I'm a former composer. I don't do any of that anymore, but I've always been very passionate about new works. So when I arrived in St. Louis, one of the ideas that was being discussed, but not in a big way, was to commission a jazz composer. So for a small work, and I said, well, why not a big work? So I reached out to Gene Dobbs Bradford, who was the head of Jazz St. Louis, and I said, can you give me a list of names, people we can pursue? And I knew some of the names on the list, but the name that really struck me, because I was familiar with his music, was Terence. And because Tale of God's Will is one of my all-time favorite CDs that Terence did. And of course, I knew his work in film. And I figured that would actually be a good place to start, because somebody who has really strong dramatic instincts like Terence, and also one of my favorite film scores is Inside Man. So we met, and Terence was intrigued enough, and we needed to come up with a subject. And I remember, a few months went by, and still there was no subject, and he called and he said, okay, I'm going to write an opera about Emile Griffith. And much to my relief, there was a subject, and I said, fantastic, who's Emile Griffith? And then Terence gave me the book, and indeed, it was a very operatic story. And then we set about to figure out how to put this thing together. Then Terence reached out to somebody he had collaborated with on a couple of films, Michael Cristofer, the playwright and filmmaker, to craft a libretto. It was a big success when we premiered it. And the other part of that is on the opening, which was hugely successful in St. Louis. I cornered Terence at the bar and said, okay, what's your second opera going to be? And the second one was Fire Shut Up in My Bones.
So so it's interesting for the Met that we're doing them in reverse order, of course. Yeah. We started with Fire Shut Up in My Bones, which you revised for the Met, and you've also spent some time revising this opera as well, and we should talk about that some more a little bit later on. But particularly with the singers who you customized the vocal lines for. But you described this as jazz in opera. That was the way you described it. And tell us about how you incorporate jazz into an orchestra.
Well, one of the things that my composition teacher always taught me that was, you know, the orchestra is a tool or an instrument just like anything else, and it's all about notation and how you put things together. But you should look at your life and all of your experiences as DNA for ideas. And one of the things that he really helped me to deal with is taking some of those things that I think just exist in the jazz world, but as a composer, break them down to the smallest element and then build them back up again to arrange it for orchestra. So it's very much like what Stravinsky would do, or any of those other guys would do, where they would take folklore and build upon it. I look at my role as a composer as to take modern day folklore and really craft it for this arena. And it's taken some work, but the thing that's really been great is my experience in film, working with orchestras, writing stuff for orchestras, understanding how to notate things to make it sound a certain way. But this realm, my biggest hurdle was writing for voices. Man, because that's a totally different thing. Because, you know, when I'm writing for orchestra, if I write for cello, I write for cello. And it goes to another orchestra, it's still written for cello. But here, all of the voices are so stylized, I really have to learn where the voices bloom. I've been learning so much about the passaggio and things that I never really knew about before, but it's really helped me understand how to use those colors and tones to help make a story dramatic, you know, and that part of it has been like a really exciting part for me as a composer, because I'm learning all the time. Even in rehearsal today, since I've been here rehearsing Champion, and we've done Champion obviously before, but these vocalists are amazing. And the things that I've been learning from them really get me excited about working on new projects. Not anytime soon.
Can you describe just the use of a jazz combo in the orchestra?
Yeah, so the reason why we say an opera and jazz is because we don't want people to think that you're going to come to this opera and hear the bassy band playing from beginning to the end. It's really about trying to use those colors and tones. So, you know, in some operas, Puccini, when he needed to have propulsion, there's a certain type of rhythmic thing he could use within the orchestra. What I do is I try to take the elements of swing and use that to help propel stories forward. Or when I want things to be sultry, we can use a shuffle or a blues type element. But the thing that's interesting about it is to be able to craft it in a way that where it works with the orchestra. Now, the tough part comes in where you have to balance the notion of what's written and what's improvised. And the whole idea for me is for you not to be able to tell either. You know, it just sounds like a natural bit of storytelling, if you will. But there are moments in time when the jazz ensemble will play with the orchestra. There's moments when they'll never play, and it's just all orchestra. And as you'll see tonight, later on, there's sometimes when it's just the jazz musicians and the vocalists.
Well, having said that, the very first musical selection, we have 3 musical selections this evening. The first one is going to be performed by Latonya Moore, who plays the role of Emile Griffith's mother, Emelda, and she's going to be accompanied by your jazz bass player, whose name is Matt Brewer.
She's singing Far Away Long Ago. Why don't you set it up?
Sure, this is in Act 2, and Emile has been on a winning streak, and he's been making a lot of money, and he's been supporting a lot of people, and he's married somebody rather impetuously, a young woman, and at his wedding reception, voices start to haunt him a bit, like, what are you doing? You know, you shouldn't be marrying this woman, and other people in his life say, you know, you got to slow down, and he explodes, and he actually has a bit of a showdown with his mother, and she recalls what it took as a young woman to get off the island and to try to find a better life.
And meanwhile, he's married this woman, but he's been living this secret life.
Exactly.
In hanging out in gay bars.
Correct.
Right. Okay, so with that, please welcome Latonya Moore, soprano of the Metropolitan Opera, accompanied by bass player Matt Brewer. Bravo, bravo, Latonya. It works, I hope. Bravo. So, that was fantastic, beautiful.
Thank you.
By now, you must be very familiar with Terence's musical language.
A bit.
Yeah. Since you started as Billy in Fire Shut Up My Bones, and now Emelda in Champion, both the mothers of the major characters.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
you played the mother of Charles Blow, and now you're playing the mother of Emile Griffith.
Yes, two entirely different kinds of moms.
How are they different?
Well, Billy Blow is more the mom that's very like a taskmaster. She's like, do your work, go to school, and she's there taking care of her children, working hard, doing everything she needs to do to make ends meet. However, Emelda Griffith is a little bit about herself. She has 7 kids, and she's left all of them with different people and just kind of gone off and lived her own life. So when she comes into the opera, she's confronted by one of her kids, but she has no idea which one it is. And so she's the whole time trying to figure out his name, whereas Billy will never forget any of her kids' names, So it's 2 different moms, but this mom, in the end, strives to sort of make up for all the lost time. So it's hard. She's kind of wicked and you want to hate her, but you can't, because at the end, she really wants what's best for her child. She wants to make her life better. And so at this point, when she's singing Far Away Long Ago, of course, they've already told you that she's trying to convince him to do the right thing, change your life. Why are you marrying this girl? And you shouldn't marry her. You're going to make her sad and all of this stuff. And so it's to show him, not to make the mistakes that she made, because he's saying, I'm going to drive in the fast car and I'm going to find a hot girl and a hot boy and a hot everything and I'm going to do what I want. And I'm like, this is the result. So be careful, because you're going to end up like me, And so I find both characters very fascinating, very interesting moms, and I'm a mother too. And although I relate more to Billy, I can see where Emelda's coming from. I kind of can.
Latonya, musically, which role is more satisfying for you?
That's a tough one, because when you say musically, if you're only talking about the actual notes that are written, I suppose Champion for me is a little better, because although the aria I sang right now is very low, in general it's a bit higher a role than Billy is. However, Billy Blow is one of those characters that's in my family. And singing her music became something so personal for me. So I love singing her, but I gotta say, I'm really getting into Emelda, because, she's kind of sexy and evil a little bit, you know what I mean? She's a money grubber, and she's got this different thing going on. So it's too soon to tell which I like better, because both operas have elements of the other in it, for each role. So for me, I'm just enjoying being something that's a little off the beaten path. I mean, I'm used to playing very serious Italian roles and things like that. So this is off the beaten path for me, and I'm still finding my way, but I think it's gonna rock.
You rock.
One of the advantages, I would say, for certainly from a casting point of view, is working with a living composer, because I think you know this, but this role was originally written for a mezzo-soprano.
Yes.
So we all collectively wanted you to be in this opera, so Terence very, very obligingly has rewritten it for soprano.
Which is fantastic. I mean, I appreciate it so much. I mean, I've been a fan of Terence Blanchard for longer than I care to admit, because that's gonna show my age. But for a very long time, I've been a fan of Terence. Especially his orchestral scores for movies and stuff. I mean, so I've always been fascinated, and so it's a huge honor for me to work on his operas, because I started out as a jazz singer, and which is how I knew Terence when I was 15.
I was 17.
Yes, yes, a wee cub himself. But because I started out that way, and I became an opera singer later, once I got into doing Terence's operas, I realized that there was a reason for my jazz background. Maybe nobody realized it then or why it was happening, but it was happening because deep down, and I will always sing Italian opera, I mean, don't ever think I won't, but deep down I feel like I was meant to do these operas and jazz here at the Metropolitan Opera. I feel like I was kind of put here for it almost. You know, so I think I just find myself in the right place at the right time with the right musician to collaborate with, the right director, and everything just, you know, just sort of clicked, you know. So I'm thrilled, I'm excited, and I'm just where I'm meant to be, I think.
Well,
yeah.
well, we're very happy you're doing both,
Yes,
both
thank
all the
you.
repertoire at the Met. So Terence, can you describe the process? How do you take a role that was written for a mezzo? Is that difficult to just musically to change it?
Some parts of it is because she's singing with other voices in some scenes that haven't changed.
Right.
But all of the things by her, where she's alone, was no problem. It was just a matter of finding a range that was comfortable for her. But I have to say, I mean, you know, she's extremely talented, as you can see, you know, to even sing those things that are a little out of her range, but still be able to produce sound, and for the audience not to even know that those things are out of her range, I thought was remarkable. So when I wrote one of the arias for Fire, the one, you know, in the second act.
A Piece for Billy.
A Piece for Billy, yeah. And when I heard her sing it, I was like, oh, so we have to find stuff in her range, because the way her voice operates and blooms is just phenomenal, you know. And I didn't have any problems about raising keys or anything for her in this piece, and it wasn't a big deal at all, not at all.
No, I mean, I love that you didn't change the melodies of the things too much. You know what I mean? Because as much as I wanted it to be in a higher key, I'm a purist when it comes to come escrito and really having what's written in the score, performing what's written on the score. So the fact that he just kind of changed the key, the first aria is up an entire fourth for all you musicians out there. Wow, that is a big, gigantic leap, but one that I was absolutely happy to see, just because the notes, you know, the actual music itself was the same and only in a different key. So he kept the integrity of the piece without, with all the changes, and kept it as it is, you know what I mean? Because I think as it is, Champion is a fantastic opera, and in many ways more operatic than Fire even. Maybe Fire is a more operatic story and a lot of the music is slower, but Champion, I mean, there are twists and turns that, I mean, y'all are not prepared for. I'm still not prepared for them. You know what I mean? But it is fantastic. The boxing ring on the screen, on the stage alone is gonna be enough to like really show you that excitement, and I can't wait for you guys to see this. It's very interesting.
We'll talk some more about the boxing ring a little bit later, but maybe I think just pacing ourselves this evening, we're probably ready for the next musical selection. So this opera is told, I don't know if we mentioned this earlier, in flashback. There's the older Emile Griffith and the younger Emile Griffith. And the older Emile Griffith, who is, as you said, Terence, is looking for redemption towards the end of his life, and he's kind of what I guess happens to a lot of boxers who've been hit in the head a lot. He's has kind of punch drunk and slightly suffering from dementia at that point. And he's looking back. I don't know if I got the right musical selection this time or not. But tell us, James, what he's going to sing.
I'm actually not sure what he's singing.
But
it's going to be very good. You know, it's what's interesting, Peter.
What did you say?
No, it's in this corner round two, I think.
Okay.
Oh, in this corner. So okay. So
unless I'm wrong.
No, this is in Act 1, and Emile, older Emile, as Peter said, is suffering from pugilistic dementia, but that was exacerbated because he came out. Emile Griffith was bashed coming out of a gay bar in the early '80s, and that kind of set him over the edge. So the clock is ticking a bit with him, and he's on this journey to meet the man, the son of the man that he killed. So everything is not just told in flashback, but through the lens of the fog of dementia. So this is an early scene where we're in the opera, and older Emile is looking back at his younger self. So older Emile is both a participant and a spectator in his life story.
Great, thank you so much. So please welcome the great bass baritone Eric Owens, accompanied by Met musical staff assistant conductor Bryan Wagorn.
can make a hat. I can swing that baseball bat like no man's business, and man, I can sing. I'm gonna be a singing baseball player, man. I'm gonna sing, swing, and slide, and make some hats up on the side. Happiness is a high hat that you put on your head. Happiness is a flower in that hat that you put on your head. And the color of the brim is the color of the sky. In my hands, the color of the sky and the flower on the brim. In my hands is a needle and some thread, and the color and some sky, and the flower on the brim. With my hands I make the hat, I make the man inside the hat, I make the happiness inside the man, inside the hat. That's me, happy me, happy me, happy me.
Bravo, bravo, Eric. There they are. So Eric, at the Met, you've gone from Wagner to Verdi to Sarajevo to Blanchard. You're a bass baritone of all musical trades on the stage of the Met, and singing all of them brilliantly. So, how important is it for you to be singing new works like this?
Well, new works are the lifeblood of any opera house. I mean, it's so important that we keep this art form alive and vibrant. And, as I was saying the other day on the HD intermission, that, all the warhorse operas that we hear once upon a time were new works. And a lot of these works that we take for granted are wonderful and beloved were not beloved when they were first performed. And so, I think what's even more important is something getting a first run is a piece being performed another time and another time, so it can become part of the repertoire, and so people can get to know it, and then they go, because the one thing I regret about Fire is that I only saw it once.
Well, you'll be happy to know it's coming back next season.
Yeah. So it's an honor to be performing newer works, and it's a blessing to have the composer in the room while you're rehearsing. I mean, when you have questions, there are many times when we have questions about, composers who have been long gone and wish they were there to answer what we want to know. But having Terence in the room, it's amazing.
What kind of questions do you ask Terence?
Can something be a little freer here, or do we have to start this one scene immediately after the previous scene? Or anything, or can, yeah.
Also, the fantastic thing is sometimes when you get a piano vocal score, especially, there are misprints. It's just inevitable. There are thousands and thousands of notes on the page. Since we have the composer here, he can tell us, that's not right. That's right. And he's done just that, so that's also fantastic.
Or we have our own misprints in our head.
Okay. In my head.
And we're like, it's like, that's not right. Oh, it's right on the page.
Yeah, but I think but I think the other part, there's another side of it that works too. With me being in the room, hearing them sing, I go, oh, well, why don't you try this? Because I've heard both of them perform before, and just today we were working on something with both of them. You know, I had discussions with both of them about the roles, and for me, I'm looking to get that thing that I've heard in them before. You know, Spike always used to tell us something about, you know, if you got Michael Jordan on your team, you gotta let him shoot. You know what I mean? And when you have, you know, A-list talent like this, you gotta let them do their thing. I'm not the type of person where, you know, it has to be done the same way all the time. I'm a firm believer in feeling the moment and allowing the moment to dictate what happens. And these are very brilliant artists, you know. Eric did one thing, there was one little scene where I say, hey man, you may want to react to what it is that you're saying. And just instantly, it turned into something else. Just minor gestures, and it turned the whole scene around for me, you know. And I love having that access to them because it's a give and take. Because the thing you got to remember is that we all feel like fish out of water. You know, because I'm new. I'm still new to this opera thing. I'm learning day by day, and I know they look at me like, "Who is this dude?" You know, and so we all feel a little, you know, off kilter a little bit. But I think that's the thing that makes it all work, because there isn't a precedent for us that we could look at and say it should be this. We're discovering it, and she says something. She said it tonight, and she said it earlier today in rehearsal. I'm discovering more and more about the character.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment about the living composer and how brilliant Terence Blanchard is, because we were in rehearsal and doing this one scene, and he came up to me, he said, I feel like the scene is too low for you. Should I take it up a little bit? And I was like, sure, you know, whatever you can do. Yeah, fantastic, right? Thinking he was gonna come in like a few days later with something. Less than 30 minutes later, he had finished it. He had written out my part completely, rewritten the scene. And I was like, thank you, Terence. I mean, in the room, within half an hour, you had new music coming from the composer. I mean, it still fit within everything that was going on, but the fact that he was able to do this in the room, I mean, this is something I wish I could ask Verdi or Puccini, you know what I mean? But we have Blanchard, and Blanchard is here to you know, adjust it to our voices and make it pop and make it work. And I just want to thank you and just say how much I appreciated this absolute moment of brilliance from you. I mean, it was absolutely fantastic to me.
You know, earlier, Jim, you were saying that the character of the older Emile Griffith is suffering from pugilistic dementia. When you were composing for the older Emile Griffith, musically, how do you express that in terms of music compared to the younger Emile Griffith?
Well, you can hear it in the aria that Eric just sang. Sonically, the tones are a little more ethereal, you know, whenever he sings versus when the younger Emile sings. That's the first thing. And then it also comes with the orchestration, trying to make sure that when he sings, we feel the thing that Jim was talking about, that fog that he's trying to clear, when he's trying to clear his mind or clear his head. You know, we feel that what's the word? It's kind of like an ambient sound that kind of represents the dementia that he's struggling with. And you know, it was something initially when I read the libretto, I said, there has to be sonically something that goes back and forth between these two. Well, we have three Emiles. He didn't tell you about, there's a little kid, Emile. But there's something that has to go back and forth to allow anybody who's experiencing the opera to understand what he's going through.
So now we are going to hear from the young Emile Griffith.
Yes.
And I guess the audiences will get a chance to understand the difference you're talking about. So for our final performance tonight, bass-baritone Ryan Speedo Green, who plays young Emile, and who's been in serious training to get in fighting trim for champion with the help of your friend Michael Bent, former heavyweight champion of the world. So he'll be singing the pivotal aria, What Makes a Man a Man.
I think what made this thing so emotional for me is that, you know, Emile, from what I've learned of him, he was a very sweet person, had a very sweet personality, but he was struggling with his sexuality. And one of the things that we'd said, that I learned, that most of the men who were from the island never really considered themselves to be gay. They never used the term. And when he's outed in the press conference by his opponent, Benny Perret, it throws him for a loop. And so the next question for him is like, well, what makes a man a man? Is it the color of his skin? Is it the cologne he wears? You know, and I love this opera, but this aria, because it puts into question all of those societal norms that we've associated with manhood, and makes you question that in a way that's very personal for him.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for that. So now please welcome Ryan Speedo Green, accompanied by Bryan Wagorn.
There inside. The man I am, and outside this man, that all this world can see. Who is this man? Who is this man who calls himself me? There is no sound. There were no people I could see. In my head, a place was empty. There was no one there but me. I can't kiss myself.
That was fantastic. Well done. Well done. So, this is your first. Speedo has had kind of a mercurial rise at the Met over the recent seasons. He was a young artist at the Met, and now is coming into his own in big way, and this is your first title role at the Met.
This is my first major / lead role, yes.
And well deserved. So we're so excited about your singing it here at the Met, and all the roles you're going to be singing at the Met in the future. Tell us a little bit about for this role when you decided to do it, and took only a little bit of persuading, but you really embraced it for the past year. You've been not only preparing for it vocally but also physically. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so it's not every day that the director of the Metropolitan Opera comes to your dressing room and talks to you about singing your first lead role during a performance. And I'll never forget, I was in my dressing room in the very end of the hall, preparing for my role that I was singing, and Mr. Gelb came into my room and he was like, Speedo, I think it's time for you to sing. You need to sing a major role here. You need to. It's like, how do you feel about the opera Champion? And I was like, actually, the irony is I knew about the opera. I said to him, like, if I've looked at it before, the role of young Emile, and it's a little bit, too high for me as a bass baritone. And he's like, well, Speedo, that's the beauty of having a living composer. Things can change. So I was like, really? And so then he set up a meeting with me and Mr. Blanchard. And I knew then when I got and had this lunch meeting with him, I told him, I've been lucky enough to have a small part of your first opera here at the Met, Fire Shut Up My Bones. I played Uncle Paul, and it was only by chance that I even got to sing that role because the person who originally was supposed to sing it passed away before the show. So the late Arthur Woodley, and so I basically sang his part. And the first day of rehearsal, when I heard my voice in Terence's music, I knew that I wanted to be a part of it again. And so, Terence is like, we can work on it together and make sure that this role fits your voice and it's unique to you. And I told him at that lunch that I wasn't going to let this opportunity, be wasted. And I said, not only do I, for me, my entire life has been about breaking people's preconceptions of opera, like who can sing it,
where you have to come from to sing it. And if you guys know anything about me, Google me, you'll find out. You'll know where I came from to get to the Met. And I've proven people wrong every day of what opera is and who can sing it. And so for this, I wanted to sort of do the reverse and break preconceptions of opera goers of what opera can be, because this opera has all of the potential to be something almost like a movie. It's action-packed. It's high-level love scenes, fight scenes, emotional children's scenes. Like it's everything you ever could want in a show on the grandest opera stage in the world. And so I told Terence, and I spoke it to Mr. Gelb later, that I'm going to work on my body. I've never lifted my hand other than when I was a kid to punch anybody. So I didn't necessarily want to be the greatest welterweight, because obviously that would be half of me right now. But I wanted to understand the mindset of a boxer. And it was a long journey. I think I'm about 62 pounds less than what I was about a year ago. Even from that picture, which was taken in, I think in February, I'm about 42 pounds less than that. So, it's all been through boxing. I've been boxing about 2 or 3 times a week with a trainer who's basically shown me that boxing is the ultimate form of one-on-one physical chess. And every day I find my brain being racked with being hit and how to fake someone out, how Emile, in his style would have fought Benny Perret, and why in the moment that he did what he did that made him memorable, his whole entire boxing style changed. And you can watch this clip online, and the 17 blows that he gave Benny Perret, he literally changed his boxing style into something almost like a brawler, instead of his finesse and what made him special to that point. And I think that's something that we're going to try to translate physically on stage with me and my colleague who's playing Benny Perret.
You referred to your own life story, which was very beautifully documented in the book by Daniel Bergner, Sing for Your Life.
Yeah.
Sing for Your Life. And you had a very troubled childhood, and I wonder, as you delved into the story of Griffith, did you find a way into that story also through your own life a little bit?
I mean, there's a particular scene, where I'm not singing, and every time it gets to this section of the first act, it takes everything in my power not to cry, and I'm almost positive you guys, when you see the opera, you'll know exactly what scene I'm talking about. And it was one of the reasons why I did not invite my mom to come see this opera, because maybe she'll see too much of herself in this character. What we do, I'm a father of 2 children, a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and we try to always, as parents, we try to always do better than what our parents did for us. We try, and hopefully we live up to that standard. Being better parents than the parents before us, and parents can only do what they know and what they've been taught, and it's hard to break that cycle. And I think this opera, as much as it's showing the audience very, 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 honestly, some of the best ways I've ever seen in an opera, about homophobia, about acceptance not only of one's sexuality, but of acceptance of one's place in the world and who you want to love and how you want to love them. But also, there's this scene which literally shows abuse and child abuse, and in a way that maybe some of you guys who are from a different generation will understand. And it leaves me utterly empty every time I'm on the stage when this happens, because I can see myself in that little boy. And he sings it so beautiful, and you guys know. You'll see it. I want to ruin it for you, but Jim has done some wondrous director magic, and just pull on your heartstrings in ways in the show that you will never see coming.
Thanks so much, Speedo. Jim, can you talk just in our last couple of minutes, just describe, if you would, you have these wonderful collaborators. You have Camille Brown, the choreographer. You have Alan Moyer, who designed the set. And can you talk a little bit about the physical production?
Sure. This is based on the original production that we did in 2012, 2013. But the original production, I think, had under 20 people in it. It was kind of a chamber piece, and it was a little more abstract. Now, we've based a lot of the ideas for the Met's supersized version on what we did originally. But again, the whole point of the story is we're looking at a person's life through this fog of dementia, and we feel that we're in an arena, and the arena is where this man's life plays out. I have to say, for the Met, this is really extraordinary to have this opportunity to enhance the production, to work with somebody I think is one of the most extraordinary choreographers ever, Camille A. Also, Michael Bent, who has been our boxing specialist on the show, having him in rehearsal, an extraordinary group of actors as boxers, and members of the Met Chorus, and truly just one of the best ensemble casts I've ever worked with. So I think it's going to be quite something.
Camille's whole approach is integrating the chorus and the dancers, and really making the whole company move in a way that I haven't seen any other choreographer do that on the stage of the Met as successfully as she has.
She's amazing. I mean, she did all 3 times we've worked together. She starts with the chorus, just getting everybody moving. And the most reluctant movers are up there really getting down, and it is quite something. But I think this particular show has been a wonderful challenge for her and for me, in that we wanted to make sure that the boxing was on the level of the choreography, that the dancers looked like credible boxers, that the actors looked like they could move well. So it took a lot of communication, interdepartmental communication with Michael Bent and Camille and everybody. So it's very exciting.
Thanks so much. We've just about run out of time, so I think since we have a living composer, he should have the last word.
I composed the last note. I don't play it. Well, I think for me, I'm still pinching myself. Even though this is my second time being at the Met, I'm still trying to figure out how I got here.
If you don't write another opera, there won't be a third time.
I've been knowing Peter for a number of years, and we've been friends for a long time. And when he first called me to say that he wanted to do Fire, it didn't really hit me until he got off the phone what was about to happen. And then when he came up to me and at the end of the last performance of Fire and said that he wanted to do Champion, I was still blown away. And it just keeps ratcheting up, because then I get to rehearsal and I hear these voices, and these voices are extraordinary. And this is probably one of the, he doesn't know this, but me and Michael Bent, we talk about you all the time during rehearsal. Because Michael Bent, not only is he a heavyweight champion, but he also acts. If you saw the movie Ali, he plays Sonny Liston in the beginning of the movie. Yeah, and he's worked with some crazy directors, So he always talks about Jim. He said, this is the calmest director I've ever seen in my life. Right? Yeah, right. Because Jim has a way of directing where he goes, what would happen if, and the next thing you know, there's a whole scene that's been staged, But being at the Met, experiencing this with the level of professionalism from everybody, you understand why it's the Met. You know what I mean? Like, everybody everybody's A-list, and it makes a difference in the production. I'm excited to see it, and we've done a few productions of this opera, but I'm excited to see it at the Met, because of everything that comes together. The set design, the lighting, the singers. Camille is brilliant beyond belief. I can't talk enough about her and what she does. She takes traditional dance and mixes it with modern dance, and it's seamless, because you can't really tell what's what. And not only is she's so dedicated, just like these people are, because she looked at Champion and she's based all of the scenes on what was happening chronologically during those periods. Now, that's phenomenal to me just in itself. And having somebody like Peter support the entire process and giving us the freedom to do it, you know, without having somebody say, oh, well, this is what we do. No, we haven't had any of that. You know, the whole thing has been about putting the best production on the stage for you guys to enjoy, you know. And like Speedo said, there's so many things in this opera for everyone. The dance sequences are off the chain. We have stilt walkers, okay? That was his idea. Stilt walkers. I mean, we have drag queens. We have everything. That wasn't and
Not legal in Florida.
And then at the end of the performance, Eric Owens, at the end, we went through it today, and I was like Speedo. I had to hold back my tears. And I've written it and seen it a number of times. But his performance of not only singing, but acting out this scene of this man who has been holding on to this hurt for 30-some years, to release that all in the blink of an eye was just phenomenal. So this ride for Champion is filled, like Latonya said, with unexpected twists and turns. And it's something that I think, you know, you will really, really enjoy viewing. And I have to thank everybody on the stage here for putting it together. Because I wrote the notes, but that's just it. I just did the notes. They're making it come to life.
You know, one of the reasons why the future of opera and new opera is so bright is because when I first came to the Met 17 years ago, the leading Met singers didn't want to sing in new operas, and now they do. And it's because of these great artists who are so committed to progressing the art form that I really believe opera has a very bright future ahead of itself. So thank you all so very much.
Thank you.